We are plugging right along. It is 1:30. I see, though, my legislative update is here. Kimberly, are you ready to come on board? Yeah. Great. You know, while you're getting settled, I will also note that we got a email this morning to the PPAC from Jeff Harden and also, I believe, his wife, Patricia Duran, from Inventor Rights with respect to the Success Act. So we're also reviewing, again, we appreciate the submission. We are also reviewing that as a PAC, and we will have some questions of our own, actually, on the Success Act as well, and I know you're presenting on that. So with that segue, does that help you at all? Yeah? Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Alton. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Government Affairs, and I'm joined by my colleague Tamara Foley. We will be presenting an update on behalf of the Office of Government Affairs. The office has been very busy this past spring and summer. There's been a lot of activity on Capitol Hill related to IP issues. So there are just a couple of things we want to update you on. Most recently, on May 9th, Director Yanku testified in front of the House Judiciary IP Subcommittee. It was a general oversight hearing that covered really a range of issues from PTAB, Section 101 reform, as well as China trademark filings. So that hearing in May really led to another hearing in front of the same committee just last month, where our trademark commissioner, Mary Dennison, testified and really provided really good data for the committee related to the surge in trademark filings that we're seeing from China. So that was just a few weeks ago that we provided that information, and we'll continue to follow up with the committee. They're very interested in the surge and what we're seeing come from China. And then, of course, Section 101, the Senate Judiciary Committee in June really held what is unprecedented 3 days of back-to-back hearings with 45 witnesses, really providing their thoughts on what changes, if any, are needed to Section 101. The USPTO did not testify, but we certainly have been monitoring this issue, talking to staffers, and the expectation is that Senator Tillis and Coons, who are the chair and ranking member of that IP subcommittee in the Senate, will be releasing draft testimony in September when Congress returns from their summer recess. So we will continue to monitor and weigh in on that legislation. Again, some of the hot topics that we're seeing up on Capitol Hill right now relate to drug pricing. The House has passed, the full House of Representatives has passed a couple of bills related to Orange Book and Purple Book, making improvements to that, to those two books. And we have been providing technical assistance and really educating a lot of Hill staffers as to the role that patents play in the whole drug pricing conversation. So there's a lot of education that we're doing now, a lot of technical assistance that we're providing as staffers and members of Congress introduce bills. They're reaching out to our office for our technical expertise, and so we're doing a lot of work to provide that. So the expectation is that both the House and Senate in the fall will move forward on drug pricing legislation. That these bills do have, many of them do have bipartisan support, so it is viewed as one of the issue areas where we will see movement, hopefully by the end of the year, and we will see something enacted and ultimately becoming law. In addition to drug pricing, we also saw some movement last month in the Senate Judiciary Committee related to sovereign immunity. And the Senate Judiciary Committee passed a bill. It's the last bullet, the PACE Act, that deals with the St. Regis Mohawk tribe issue that we heard a lot about last year. So that did pass out of the committee, and it is possible we'll see that also move to the full Senate when they return in September. Another topic that I want to touch on is certainly diversity and innovation. There's been a lot of interest in patent diversity applications that we receive here at the agency. The Success Act that became law last year required the PTO to produce a report. That report is being prepared by our Office of the Chief Economist. Andy Toole is leading up that effort. Andy's team held hearings this spring and this summer, 3 hearings here at Alexandria, also in Detroit and in San Jose. And his office has received testimony from over 35 witnesses and has received over 70 written comments. So he is in the process of pulling all of that data together, looking at all of the publicly available data that really talks about underrepresented communities, so that's women, people of color, veterans, and what are some of the challenges to those groups really entering the patent process. So that report is due to Congress by October 31st. We are working to meet that deadline and really present a good product that has recommendations on possible legislative ideas on how to see more representation within these different groups. And sort of piggybacking on that, the IDEA Act was also introduced in the House and Senate. This is a bill that would require the USPTO to start to collect this data voluntarily from our applicants so that we would get information in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, age, military status, educational level attained, income level. So there's a lot of information that this bill would require us to collect. So we will continue to talk to staff about providing feedback on the best way to actually collect this information.
Kimberly, may I stop you there?
Yes.
So as Marilee had mentioned, we've gotten some comments from the public that we're taking a look into, but in particular, there was a comment related to economically disadvantaged inventors, and the point being made that there's a cost and clear perceived risk associated with not only filing the application but protecting it thereafter in PTAB and the point being made that there's less inventors in that subpopulation that will be entering into the patent application process. And so while you're collecting information on the applicants, there's this issue of missing data so that you're not able to collect data on inventors that are in that population, the economically disadvantaged that aren't entering the arena. And I think that presents an obstacle to identifying risk factors or avenues in which we can increase the likelihood that population of inventors can participate in the patent process. So the question is not only how are you going to collect the data on the patent applicants, but how are you going to identify those would-be applicants that aren't able to enter the arena simply because of that disadvantage?
Right. And I think that certainly will be a challenge. Right now, the PTO, and the report does talk about this, our chief economist has pulled together sort of an outline where we talk about the resources that we have here at the agency to try to reach that population, the pro bono assistance, the pro se assistance programs. And so I think that it's our intent to really look at the population that uses the pro bono and the pro se to see how do we really get to that population that is economically disadvantaged to try to make sure that they are brought in and they are part of this process. So we did receive testimony, I believe certainly at the hearing that was held here at headquarters from people who did share that concern. So that is something that we will touch on in the report.
I know the hearing was right after our PPAC meeting in May, and personally, I didn't know about it, and if I had known about it, I probably would have come back that following week to try to participate in it. But are you going to, are you done, or are you doing more hearings? Are you doing more outreach? So I think it would be helpful for the user community to sort of understand some of the processes that are going on within the office. Okay. If you can, I don't know, because who's leading the charge on this? Maybe that's another way to put it, you know, so.
So
right.
our Office of the Chief Economist is taking the lead on the drafting of this report, the hearings that we held across the country. And I apologize that you were not notified about the public hearings that we held. I regret that oversight. We did, within the office, have a group that met to try to figure out how do we make sure that the right folks know about this hearing, that we have good turnout. And it was something that was sort of a learning process for us of how to reach the right audience. So there were a lot of lessons learned for us, and I think we got better when we had our last hearing in Detroit. I think that hearing had the most participation, but it was based off of many of the lessons that we learned from the hearing that was held here, and then even the one in San Jose. So we got better, is what I'm saying in terms of outreach. But and I will talk to our chief economist because he does have a timeline. We did have Federal Register notice that went out to alert the public that we were having these hearings. But often the audiences that we're looking for, they don't read the Federal Register. And so that meant we had to do a little bit more, just posting it on our website and sending it to some of the usual suspects that just didn't cut it. So we really worked hard with the affinity groups that we have here at the USPTO, as well as some of the other offices that do outreach to really say, can you look at your Rolodex, look at your contacts, and who should we be touching as we go to these different places? So as I said, we got better. We learned a lot of lessons about how to reach these communities and how we can do a better job. But moving forward, we did have a comment period that closed, I think, back in June for the public to submit comments if they were not able to attend one of those hearings and provide testimony. And so now the chief economist is compiling, summarizing all of that, and pulling that together for this report that's due at the end of the year. I will talk to him in terms if there are additional comments or feedback, if there's a process to incorporate that between now and the publication date. I will find that out, and I'm happy to share that information with you all.
I would, sorry, Mark,
Go ahead.
if I can. So one thought is it depends on how big the size of the response was that you were able to get. If it's a small pool, if there's an opportunity to not to do a redo, but at least reopen for comments now that the hearing and the report has been more fully disclosed or brought to people's attention, including PPACs, then maybe there is an opportunity for folks who are now aware to be able to provide their comments because the report is so important, and we all know that it is the director's, one of his top objectives for the Patent Office, and PPAC supports that supremely. So that would be a suggestion, is to reopen for comment period, maybe even give guidance on the issues that maybe you didn't get comments on and could use more data points on. So a more refined survey or something like that could help. Great. And then, and I haven't seen it, but I wonder if, to the extent that you can ask about income levels, that might help on promoting or being able to identify some solutions for addressing lower income would-be inventors.
Okay. Now, I will definitely take all of this back and work with our chief economist on answers to that. The Office of the Chief Economist is the office that earlier this year issued their report that looked at women and trends related to women and patents activity. So they're very focused on this issue, and they've done a lot of work. So let me just talk to them in terms of the process and where they are now and how to incorporate some of these suggestions into the final product.
Yes, indeed. The AIA, the American Invents Act, actually had provisions requiring studies to be done early on. I believe those have been completed many years ago now, but Not sure what the follow-up on that was, but it is a topic that's been at hand for quite a while, rightfully so.
When we were first, the Success Act and the discussions were going on, at least my natural assumption about that was about underrepresentation, either, gender or backgrounds or veterans or whatever. But I think what came out of some of these hearings is, and I was not there personally, so this is indirect, is that some of these underrepresented individuals, in particular women, were discouraged from filing patents because post-grant, you might get a patent, but post-grant, maybe it gets taken away. The other issue is whether or not they have qualified representation to assist them in these things, right? So those are specific things that are issues that I think are valid in the sense of it is hard to find qualified counsel if you don't know where to go. And even for lawyers, we tend to network and ask who's good and who's not. Maybe not the last question, but and so I think these are the things that when they bubble up, given the efforts that the Patent Office has made, it'd be great to be able to have more pointed responses to those.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I know just this past spring, there was a real push within our Office of Communications to revamp our website, the homepage, so that there's, I think, when you go to our website, it's prominently featured. Are you an inventor? Are you an independent inventor? Learn about the resources in your state, in your city. And there's a map of the United States, and you click on that, and all of the pro bono, all of the pro se, all of those resources are there. And so that was a big effort that really was at the direction of Director Yanku to say, let's make sure that this information is front and center for people who may not have the resources or the background, and we want them to know how to do that and to not have to click on link after link after link on our website to find this information, but have it very prominently featured. And we're proud that we're able to revamp our website to feature that information prominently. Any other questions on success?
Yeah, I met this morning with Laura Peters and with your chief economist, and really they're kind of like the canary in the mine, sensing the bad gas, the poison. The problem per se is not at the agency, but it does indicate there is a societal problem. The gender they're on top of, but how to look at a name on a patent application and determine melanin skin levels is pretty tough. And then veteran status. I mean, and they want to do a good job. It's how you do it.
Right.
How do you look at an application and tell if a guy, had or a woman had a DD 214? That's going to require some, quite a bit of work to get this ready by October. Number one. Number two, I was very happy. There's been someone corresponding with me from the public that insists that this agency has bias, gender bias, and that applicants are being treated differently based on their gender. And this morning, the chief economist put all that, he laid it all out and said, this is why the study that they produced is ineffective and why it's wrong. And that was good to hear that. I just can't imagine any examiner here treating an applicant different because of their gender and race. They don't know, and they're sure not going to know if it's a veteran status. But we do appreciate the work that the chief economist and Laura Peter are doing to get this done and to comply with the wishes of Congress. And anyway, Godspeed. Get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Will do.
On the IDEA Act, has the PTO considered the practicality of collecting the demographic information that's being asked for in the statute, proposed statute?
We have, and we're in the process now of providing suggestions on maybe an alternative way to kind of get the information that they are seeking. The IDEA Act is asking for this information on the front end as part of the application process that would require us to collect this information and keep it separate from the application. We have our concerns as to whether or not people will actually provide that information. And so our suggestion that we've been debating internally within the PTO is whether it makes more sense to request this information at the end as part of a customer service survey that we already do, and just ask those different questions. So it's a debate that we're having internally. These are concerns that we've shared with the congressional offices, and we'll continue to sort of give them our feedback on a better way to get, I think we all want the same information. It's just how do we get there? How do we get the best response rate from our clients, from our applicants? And I think we don't believe that the IDEA Act really is ideal in terms of getting the best response rate.
I think another question in addition to how do you get that information is why does the agency want or need it? And I think that needs to be very clear so that individuals know or can decide whether or not to respond or not. You know, as an inventor, if I want to have access to the patents, and not that they won't have access, but to the extent that, you know, if there are any concerns about it, what could help assuage any of my concerns about the data is why does the Patent Office want it? Why does it need it? And that I think those are fair questions, but more importantly, it'll achieve the purpose that the Patent Office is looking to achieve, which is to get that data.
Right. No, I agree. Thank you.
I personally thought that the scope and breadth of the question of data that they want for the IDEA Act was over-encompassing. I think I struggle with why the PTO needs to know all of that. And the cost, I mean, and the IT solution to order to implement that access of data. And in this day and age, I mean, what don't you know about me, right? Are there some things I don't want the federal government to know just because I'm applying for a patent? So there's, you know, and then we were discussing, how does this apply if I have an inventor in the EU? Right. So I understand the grandiose purpose here, and obviously I thought about my practice when the Success Act came out and how many women inventors I have had before me, and it's not a lot, and for a variety of different reasons. So, but you know, some of these quote solutions are just not well thought out, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, another point that was raised by a member of the public is that to the extent that the collection of the information is on a voluntary basis, it's unlikely to be accurate. That people, for all kinds of reasons, are not going to be forthcoming with this detailed information, and the resulting aggregate picture won't be correct.
Those are all sort of concerns and debates that we've had internally and continue to have conversations. I know the bill, the IDEA Act, would require us to collect this information twice a year. One of the ideas that we've been talking about is maybe this should be every other year. And so there's just a lot of discussions that we're having, that we're in the very early stages of thinking through the IT piece of it, just the practicality of how we would do it. So we're happy to keep you posted as we continue to have these conversations and even work with the staffers on the Hill in terms of possible revisions and assistance that we provide to them to really improve the bill in our view.
I just wanted to chime in. Among the many concerns that we would have on an application basis is what people do with data when it comes out of here, or how they interpret it. Right. So somebody may, pick examiner X and TCY and note that he or she granted X number of applications to men and X to women, and you could, imply, as people do with data, that, examiner X is biased against men or something. And so that's one of the biggest fears. And then if that were the case, you have an examiner responding to that, feeling under pressure that they had to, grant more applications to men. It's simply, information like that really has no place in the patent system. There's no part of the statute that says that anyone other than a person should be entitled to rights. And the misuse of that is so easy. And there's still some data floating around on the internet that says I have a case that I owe my supervisor. I've not voted for 25 years, and I'm not making that up.
Well, again, we're happy to keep you all posted and on the work that we're doing related to the report that's due, and as well as this legislation that's moving through Congress. Definitely want your input as we move forward with these two initiatives. Any other questions on Success Act? All right, if not, I will just wrap up with my final slide that just, again, highlights some of the legislative priorities for the agency related to continuity of fees during a lapse in appropriation, investment authority of the PTO, elevating the rank of our IP attachés to counselor, as well as 101 reform, and of course drug pricing and patents. So with that, I will open the floor for any additional questions.
No, anything else? No?
Okay.
Steve?
Yeah, on some of the more substantive type of issues, it's substantive, but ones where the user community may not be of a single mind on, how does the office form a policy position on? For example, on the drug pricing, certainly there is an interest in lowering drug prices. I think that's something that's universally accepted. But at the same time, you don't want to throw away innovation in the process of lowering drug prices. So how does the office go about forming a policy position, or even for that matter, even on 101? I understand how the office can share, here's the unintended consequences or intended consequences of certain legislative action, but in terms of more active engagement, how does the office form that policy?
There is, and this is with any legislation, a pretty complicated interagency process that the USPTO goes through. So what we have been providing so far on 101 and on drug pricing is really more sort of education to the staffers and sort of walking them through the bills and giving them our thoughts on them. But in terms of proposals, there's a process where USPTO, as part of the Department of Commerce, our policy team works with our counterparts at the Department of Commerce. There's a process then within Commerce to then share any policy proposals. And again, this applies to any policy, to other agencies that might have some equity as it relates to whatever policy, and then ultimately going to the White House for clearance. So it's sort of a long process, but whenever you see sort of a position on anything that has the support of the administration, it has gone through this very detailed interagency process.
Okay. Well, I think we covered a lot in that segment. Thank you.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll be watching.
Great.
So, Jennifer, how are we doing on finance? Are we good for finance? Yes?